Hi, and welcome to CBD Landuse Map Work with Mr. Mercer on Geography Geeks. As always, with questions such as this, there's an order to how you should approach things. And in this question where you're being asked to describe the urban environment and then explain reasons for the things that you find there, I would recommend approaching this by starting with the street pattern. Street pattern's nice and easy to identify. So in the CBD, you can expect to see one of two things. Either you might find areas of gridiron street pattern. You can see examples of that on this map. Notice that on this map I'm using a map scale different to the other clips, though this is still the Plymouth map, so you can still practice along with the videos. And we could argue that we have a gridiron street pattern, for example, here. That's an indication that high land values have resulted in narrow streets and have resulted in town planning ensuring that as many buildings get into the space as possible. However, in other areas, you could perhaps reference here. There's evidence of densely packed streets with very little open space, but in more of a random street pattern. And that indicates the pre-urban nucleus of the city, one of the earliest areas of the city, right at the centre. And at the time that that area was constructed, there would have been very little planning. And so the street pattern is more irregular. The narrow streets in the CBD are also a result of the fact that at the time of construction, motorised transport wasn't present, and therefore the streets did not have to be very wide. From this, you can then infer other aspects about the environment, but we'll come to that later. So you've talked about the street pattern. The next thing to talk about is building type. Now, in this area, there will be very little to none residential housing. However, you can talk about areas such as here. You could suggest that these buildings must be very tall due to their limited surface area and also due to the land value, meaning that you would have to build up in order to make a best value for the land. The next thing to talk about after street pattern and building type would be transport infrastructure. So, what do we have? Well, look out for things like bus stations and train stations. Notice that this map extract doesn't furnish us with a train station, but it does have a bus station. Also look at route centres. Now this A road here will be a good example of a route centre. We can tell that because various roads join at that point. We have a road coming in from the north, we have a road coming in from the east, and of course this one from the west. So you could give the example that the CBD here is a route centre. Now the reason for that is because this is the area of the city that everybody needs to be able to access due to the high number of high order services such as bank headquarters and other offices and public buildings. There is also, in this instance, a ring road. And not all CBDs will have a ring road, but it is a means for the traffic to be able to bypass the centre of the city to avoid causing increased traffic congestion. Make sure you don't refer to this as a bypass, which is a road that goes around a city in order to solve a similar problem. That brings us to talking about services. Now, the CBD is very rich for services that you can score marks on. The first ones I would always recommend you go for are tourist services. The reason for that is because they are often coloured blue and therefore very easy for you to identify at speed. Quote a couple of them, give them a grid reference, but don't go on at length about the tourist services. You can explain them by suggesting that this area is the most historical area of the city and therefore the area that's likely to attract the most tourists. But you can also refer to the presence of transport infrastructure, meaning that this is the area that tourists are most likely to congregate at. Other services to mention would be concentrations of churches or indeed cathedrals. These are important because at the time of construction the population would have been much more religiously observant, and also because this is the most easily accessible and most important part of the city, and so it's where you would have built your cathedral. On the note of services, there are many other things that you could mention, but I would move you on. This question isn't going to go for more than 8, 9, 10 marks, so bear that in mind with the level of detail that you're giving. Now that you've established street pattern, building type, transport infrastructure and services, you can use that evidence to speculate about the wider environment. The narrow streets, for example, will cause this area to be congested. Therefore, pollution levels, noise pollution and air pollution, will be higher. Traffic vibrations may cause architecturally significant areas in the city centre to be damaged. The lack of open space due to the high land value will mean that this is not a very green environment. Notice that these are things that I can't actually see on the map. There are no areas of green marked, for example. So I'm actually scoring marks for what is not present on the map. And this is a valid way to gain credit. Okay, you may find in your notes that there are other features of the CBD that we've talked about. And that's good, because when you practice this, you want to practice it with as many different maps as possible. Because in the end of the day, the map you see in the exam will not be a map you have seen before. So you need to be able to adapt to as many different examples of the CBD as possible. Okay, I hope this has helped, and if you've got any questions, come and find me in class.